Hello there, viewers. Today we are taking a look at Zorin OS. And now, to clarify, this is going to be much more a first impressions sort of thing than it is a review. Now, I did record a video yesterday where I was going through my first impressions, like recording that as I was exploring the OS. I decided to re-record that today and just kind of do more of a summary of things that I found out about it and what my thoughts on it were, to, keep things shorter, more concise. So first things first, I do want to mention on the login screen, they do have Wayland available, but it is on Xorg by default. So just something to note for people who might be curious about Wayland. Now, where's my mouse? There's my mouse. Now, out of the box, it does use a light theme. I have already changed some things, so Zorin does use a customized Gnome Desktop. Let's just set everything back to default real quick here. So by default, the desktop looks like this, and I gotta be honest, I've kind of been less and less of a fan of dark theme or flat themes lately, but Zorin's does look really good. It does look really good for a flat theme, because with some flat themes, it's kind of hard to tell what is and is not a button sometimes. Not so much the case with Zorin, because here you can kind of clearly see, okay, that's a different shading than the rest of the background. Hey, look, it's clickable. Hooray. I know Yaru, Ubuntu's theme, is kind of weird like that. It's kind of hard to tell if it's actually a button or not, but not so with Zorin. So good job to them there. And I do also really like their icon theme. The folders look really good. And some other cool things is, so they have this Zorin Appearance App right here, which is, basically it lets you tweak things that normally you'd have to do in GNOME Tweaks, but it's in a dedicated app called Zorin Appearance, where with the core version of Zorin, which is what I'm testing here because I can't afford the Ultimate Edition right now, you get 3 layouts. 2 of them are more Windows-like. I've heard some argument that this one is kind of more Chrome OS-like. Take your pick. So by default, it looks like this. You can also change it to something like this, which is kind of more like what Windows Mint does, and I believe Windows 10 kind of does this as well. I don't know. I haven't used Windows 10 in forever. You do also get this application preview when you hover over the app, so pretty sure this is Dash to Panel. Some version of Dash to Panel. They probably forked it. And then you also get a touch interface available out of the box, which kind of has more of a floating panel. Your apps are shown in the center. Otherwise, the layout is still very similar. I'm going to go ahead and leave it on the default look there. By default, desktop icons are turned on. I don't care for desktop icons, so I turn those off. That does also hide the desktop folder from your favorites over in Files. And you can also change what side of the window your title bar buttons are on, and you can toggle animations. And speaking of the Zorin look and feel, with the theme settings, you actually have quite a bit of control here. So I couldn't get this to work in testing. I tried manually changing the clock and whatnot, but it didn't actually change. Theoretically, that's supposed to make it dark at nighttime, so it'd be the dark theme at nighttime, but then it would go back to the light theme at daytime. I couldn't get that to work. You can also specifically change other theme stuff here. You can go with Adwaita. Note that it is the old look for Adwaita, not the new Adwaita. You can go with Adwaita Dark. You can go with a high contrast theme, and then what they call Zorin 95, which kind of just looks more like a grayed out version of their normal theme. And then to go back to the new, the more modern Zorin theme, you just click one of these again, and then it puts it back to normal. Personally, I like the dark with the gray accent. This kind of makes it black and white, kind of like that monochrome look. You do have other options for accent colors. You have the default blue, green, red, orange, purple. I'm going to leave it with the gray. And you can change your fonts if you want to. And then you also have other panel settings, so you can put the panel on the top or leave it on the bottom. You can customize the height of it. So if you don't like how tall it is out of the box like this, you can always make it shorter. And there's also show activities button. So if you click that, that'll bring up the activities overview as opposed to having to go into the menu and going to activities overview. And by default, all right, there's also the show desktop button. Turn that off, there's nothing there. You have that on, just minimizes your windows. Very similar to Windows, actually. Not so much that button, I don't think, but the show desktop button, yeah. In touch mode, auto hide is on by default. It is not in, I'm just going to call it Windows mode, traditional desktop mode. So you can toggle that as you choose, and then clock and calendar. By default, everything's off. I had the date on. Sometimes I do these too as well, but And for taskbar position, you can have it centered or just off to the left. You can either have the applications grouped or not grouped, which changes between that, as I showed earlier, how it's more Windows-like or more Chrome OS-like. And then locking the taskbar, I'm not sure what that does. I think that's just the order of your applications here. Anyway, by default, left super key opens the Zorin menu, which looks to me to be based on the Arc menu extension. And that's all well and good, especially if you like a more Windows-like layout. I like the activities overview, so I put the super key to access this. Now, you don't have a button to click to go to the applications drawer you would get with Gnome, but one, you can search your applications or just do super A as you would on standard Gnome. So that's all well and good, and I do appreciate the customization options you get with the core edition of Zorin, which obviously you would get with Zorin Ultimate. So, first impressions, it is actually pretty good. I really appreciate the options that you get. I like being able to go between light and dark and changing the accents of the theme. That's a really cool thing that they do here. Another thing I found out after recording my original video on this is if you right-click a folder, you can actually also change the color. So I can make my download my documents folder there magenta, and then it changes like that. It does lose the special icon that you get with like the other home folders, but still something cool, and you can just change that back to default if you want. So that's also a nice touch they have there. Now, they also use Ubuntu or GNOME software as their software center. They have Snap and Flatpak support out of the box. I don't believe that FlatHub is active out of the box, but you do get Snap and Flatpak support right here. And from what I've heard, another very nice value add is that you can install Lutris straight from their software center here, as they have their own Zorin Apps PPA, which Lutris is part of. And if you're gaming on Linux and you haven't heard of Lutris yet, go check out the Linux Gamer's video on Lutris. He goes over it. He goes over a lot of great things about it. So go check that video out by the Linux Gamer. Now, let's talk a little bit about, some concerns I have with Zorin, and also a little bit of Zorin Core versus Zorin Ultimate. Also, the Firefox homepage that they have set out of the box is like their own sort of custom thing here. You can search Google, Wikipedia, YouTube, or Twitter. I would like to see DuckDuckGo as an option, but that's still cool that you have these at all, because if you're just switching to Linux, chances are you're not even going to know what DuckDuckGo is. Chances are a lot of people using Linux might not even necessarily know what DuckDuckGo is, but either way, I would like to see DuckDuckGo as an option there, but that's a very minor thing. Let's go to their website real quick. So let's go to maximize you. Now, they do also have an OEM deal with Star Labs. Jason Evangelo put out an article about that, an exclusive article confirming that. So that's kind of cool. That's at least one thing that this computer section is referring to. No idea if they have any deals with other companies, but they do with Star Labs. So that's pretty cool. Let's go back to the download page. So they have a few different editions. Apparently there's an education edition too. Don't know a thing about that, but that exists. They have Ultimate and Core. With Core, I have not installed any extra applications here. You get a decent range of both kind of necessity, like necessary utility sort of things, as well as some other nice-to-have additions. You have a few games here. You have your web browser. Now, you have Ramina, which I believe is remote desktop software. I have never used that. Not sure that the average user would need that, but, well, it's there. You can remove it if you want to, or use it if you want to. You get the whole LibreOffice suite is installed by default, and so is GIMP. And they use they also include Shotwell as a photo manager. Then under Office, you get calendar contacts. They ship Evolution as the mail client, which is interesting because, a lot of desktops choose to ship Thunderbird. I'm personally a fan of Geary, but they opted to ship Evolution, which, it's a lot more mature than Geary. It is a lot more mature than Geary. And right, with LibreOffice, they have it using the ribbon interface by the tabbed interface by default, which is very much like Microsoft's ribbon interface. A lot of people don't like it. I might be weird. I kind of do because I like having the things like categorized like this, but that's just me. If you don't like it, you can always switch it from the tabbed interface to standard toolbar like how LibreOffice is by default. I am going to leave that on tabbed though. I already know people are going to call me out for saying that I like the tabbed interface. I'm ready for it. Go for it, guys. Anyway, Zorin Ultimate has, of course, everything you get with the core essentials of Zorin Core. You get a few more layouts. You get a bunch of games included. Open source games, of course, but you do get a bunch of games included. It also includes Ultimate Lite, which will be available soon, not available yet. And then the best business and media apps, whatever that means. So like I said, I'm looking at Zorin Core for this video because money is tight, so I can't justify spending $40 on Zorin Ultimate right now. I believe Nick from the Linux Experiment was provided a copy of Zorin Ultimate to review. I don't fully remember, but if you want to see more about Zorin Ultimate, I believe his video was on Zorin Ultimate. Now, that being said, I mentioned a concern. Oh, also, Zorin Lite runs on XFCE. So there's that. Good for older computers. Now, I mentioned some concerns that I had with it. It was brought to my attention on Mastodon after I first mentioned I recorded a first impressions video of Zorin that there seems to be some not readily apparent telemetry with Zorin. Now, yeah, you kind of need to hunt for this too, because I'm not even sure where to find. Oh, okay. Way here at the bottom, if you click privacy policy in this tiny font here, you get to the privacy policy. So they do mention they collect information here. Account registration makes sense to use certain part of their services. Okay. Newsletter, if you subscribe to a mailing list. Well, you're subscribing to a mailing list. Of course, you're going to get that information to be subscribed to that. Payment information. Makes sense. Forums and comment threads. Makes sense. So the concerning part is when you get down to anonymous pings. This is specifically when you are using Zorin OS itself. This is not disclosed anywhere in the installer, and apparently it's only mentioned here in the privacy policy, which you have to go and hunt for. I didn't see any other links to it. It was just down at the bottom of their webpage. Let me double check that real quick, actually. I'm going to open a new tab here. Go back to the main page. Download Zorin. Let's see. What if we just go to download Core Essentials, skip to downloads? Is that mentioned anywhere? No, you have to go digging for the privacy policy. So what this is when using Zorin OS, your computer may occasionally send us a ping, which includes an anonymous unique identifier for your computer. So they use that information to count the number of active users, and it does not identify you unless someone discloses it separately. And they do mention how to disable it here by uninstalling the Zorin OS census package. That being said, if they're going to collect information about this, now, I mean, they don't have to, and they're technically within their right to just have it in the privacy policy, but it's kind of a dick move to not disclose that on install, because even canonical with Ubuntu. people gave them a lot of crap for wanting to collect information about people's installs, but at least Canonical discloses that in the Ubuntu installer. With Zorin here, most people installing it aren't even going to know. I had no idea until it was brought to my attention on Mastodon by the @Linux account mentioning that Tom from Switch to Linux mentioned that in his look at Zorin OS. So, in short, if you are privacy conscious, maybe give a more careful look at Zorin OS, and you'll probably want to uninstall this package unless you read this and you're okay with that information being sent. Don't bother, but that's something that they should mention in the installer, I think. Other than that, Zorin is a very excuse me. Other than that, Zorin is a very polished desktop. It's a customized version of GNOME. I don't usually care for customized versions of GNOME, but I actually do like Zorin OS's implementation. And other than the privacy concern with that anonymous pinging that's only mentioned hidden in their privacy policy, it does seem like a very solid system, and it is one I would consider recommending to newcomers. I believe they also... and another thing that makes it nice for Linux gamers, as well as having Lutris, is when you're going to install it, they include the NVIDIA... I believe they include the proprietary NVIDIA drivers on the ISO, so you can boot with that. So, 1, it'll make it easier for NVIDIA users to test it out. 2, you'll be able to install your NVIDIA graphics drivers right away. From what I could tell. Cannot confirm because I use AMD graphics, but that is how it seemed. Anyway, this was a bit long for just a first impressions video, but I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know your thoughts on Zorin OS down in the comments below. If you want to stay in touch with me and or support the channel, you can follow the links down at the bottom of the description below. Till next time, this has been Axel. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.